everybody. Welcome to Bone2Pick. I am Michael Davis, and we are extremely fortunate today to have an opportunity to sit down with one of my favorite musicians on any instrument, the great Dick Oatts. Dick has been the lead alto saxophonist for the Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, now Vanguard Jazz Orchestra for 4 decades. He was a member of the critically and popularly acclaimed Flim the BBs. He's had an extremely prolific solo career, having recorded 17 CDs as a leader and a co-leader. He's had hundreds of appearances as a sideman and featured soloist with the likes of James Taylor, Lou Rawls, Luther Vandross, Joe Lovano, Eddie Gomez, Lisa Fischer, Bud Shank, Terrell Stafford, just to name a few. He is the professor and artistic director of jazz studies at Temple University in Philadelphia, formerly on the faculty at Manhattan School of Music, and has been an artist in residence at the Amsterdam Conservatory for almost 2 decades now. On a personal note, as I mentioned, to me, he's one of the great lead alto players of all time, if not the greatest, and really excited that he's going to be playing lead alto on my Hip-BoneU big band project coming up in about 3 weeks. So very lucky to have that happen, and we're very lucky today to be featuring him as our Artist of the Month for March. So, Dick, thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your crazy busy schedule.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I know I'm one of the few reed players on this show, and I'm amazed and very appreciative.
Well, thank you. It's totally our pleasure. And I should mention, you're absolutely right. We typically focus on brass and the folks who've had a big impact on the brass world, but Dick, I think you've actually had a huge impact on lead players on any instrument. Even Nick Marchand, one of my favorite lead trumpet players anywhere in the world, he credits you as one of the biggest influences on his lead playing. So we'll definitely talk a little bit about how you look at lead players from a brass perspective as well. But why don't we start? I know you grew up in Iowa, and your dad is a jazz musician and a band director. Maybe you could tell us some of your memories of that time in your life.
Well, when my father was from Iowa, and after World War II, he came back and he had tuberculosis, so he couldn't really play the alto anymore for maybe about 5 years. So he was in the vet's hospital, and he was there for about 3.5 years. And so he started to learn how to write music and repair instruments. So he figured he had to have something together when he got out. And so he got out and he opened up kind of a repair shop that was close to Drake University, and he started a lot of bands working in Iowa, and then decided to get married and have kids, and then all of a sudden it wasn't lucrative enough to just have that kind of business, and he wanted more consistency. So he went back to school, he had a business degree before the war, but then he got an education degree in music, and started teaching in a small little farm town about 40 miles west of Des Moines called Earlham. And that's when he started at kind of a jazz programs, and he started at that school and then kind of went around the state for the next 20 years, wow. 25 years, just introducing jazz programs to interested band directors that were just used to having concert bands and wind ensembles and orchestras. And so he would always bring my brother and I. My brother's Jim, he's a trumpet player, and we'd always go around and do clinics with him. And that's where I was first kind of introduced to his world of education and also his dedication to music, which was very inspiring. So that's what kind of kept me I think through all my years of seeing his inspiration through what he did, and to see that my brother and my sister and sisters and my entire family was pretty musical. So it was a rare treat to have such an amazing family to learn from and to complain about if we're playing the wrong notes, and everybody kept us in check. And so late 50s and during the 60s, it was a pretty an adventurous time for jazz programs in the United States. It was an amazing industrial stage, I should say,
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
that music. And it was incredible how much my dad contributed. And now when I go back there and I see the thousands of bands that are from a lot of his inspiration, it's really encouraging to me to see that, yeah, you can make a statement.
Yeah. Oh, that's really awesome, man. I knew that your dad was an important guy in the region and jazz education in general, but sounds like a real pioneer in the jazz education
Yeah.
movement.
Well, he loved to swing, and he loved blend,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't matter if he had a fantastic trumpet section or bone section. He'd know how to make what little he had work incredibly well. So it was a pretty amazing gift.
Yeah, that's
Very encouraging. Even on his deathbed, he still had students like they were 65 years old. Said, Jack, that was the best time of my life. Experiencing music that went into farming or whatever, and would probably never touch the trombone again.
Mm-hmm.
But he remembered that time.
Wow. What a cool influence on your life. That's fantastic. Well, you mentioned Drake University, and maybe you could talk about your time there. And then I believe you went to Minneapolis and spent some time there early in your professional career. Maybe you could talk about that.
My brother was going to Drake, and my father had gone to Drake, and my grades in high school barely got me into Drake. And I was more interested actually in playing than I was in going to school. I tried it, and I thought it was a great school, but it was just not the right timing for me. I couldn't do this at the same time. I couldn't play and study at the same time. So I had to figure out another alternative. And actually, a guy by the name of Jack Gillespie, who used to work in my father's bands in the 50s in Iowa, had heard me. And he was a contractor in Minneapolis. And he asked me, hey, how would you like to come up and do some work up here? He said, I think I can find you a lot of work. And I said, well, that sounds a lot better than, me going into the service, because that was my other alternative,
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to try it. And the funny thing was, I asked my dad for, I needed a couple $100 to take my 55 Pontiac and myself up, And he says, well, I don't think you should leave school, you need something to fall back on. And, it did all right by me, and, you should really, watch yourself, And I said, Dad, I don't think it's for me, though. He says, well, it was good enough for me. Why is it? I said, well, I don't want to really go down there. But I said, it was great for you, and you have awful big shoes for me to follow, But actually, I think it was because he's from the Depression. He was very cheap, tight-fisted.
Sure.
He didn't want to loan me $200. So, because he figured, he's going to be asking me a week later for another.
The next installment.
So anyway, I took the $200 and went up there, and it was in a snowstorm. I got up there, and I met Jack Gillespie at some corporate center, and he says, you got 2 weeks at this place called Diamond Jim's, which is kind of a gentleman's club, and girls are swinging from the rafters and all that. You're backing up 2 comedians. So, and you have to play a little yakety sax too. And I said, oh, well, okay, I'll try. I didn't know if I could do it, but I went there, and that's where I met a lot of great players. And it was a quintet, and Steve Wright was a great trumpet player from Minnesota, and he kind of actually helped me and took me under his wings a little bit. And I had 2 weeks there, and then I had 2 nights off in 6 months.
Wow, that's awesome.
And within 1 year, I was making more money than my father ever did teaching. So it was funny.
Solid $200 investment on his part, right?
It was funny how he turned it around and says, I think you're doing really good up there. You don't have to go back to school. I think you're all right. I think you'll be okay. So, but it's funny. I always really did want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you get so busy, it's hard to just change gears. And I was very busy up there. At that time, like I was talking to Ken about, it's like a lot of the guys are already on some of the bands, like Woody's band and Buddy's band. And it left some guys went out to Vegas, or some guys went to different. And so there was all this work up there for young guys.
Wow. That's cool.
And so that's when I just started, that's where I was starting to learn how to sight read better, double, learn tunes. Just, it wasn't about, for me, being a jazz player as much as just making a living, so I wasn't dependent on my father's small dole, I should say. And so I really had an amazing education up there. It was really like some of the best players I could have ever played with. Guys that nobody would ever hear about. Lead alto players that were incredible. Guys that knew thousands of tunes and told me how to learn them. This is the tunes that you should really focus on, and what composers and what eras. And, you know, I used to go on club dates, and they'd ask me, well, do you know It's You or No One? I says, well, no. Well, if you can use your ear, you'll get through it. You have good ears. So I get through it. But if I came back the following week and they called It's You or No One and I didn't know it, it was cool. They just wouldn't hire you again. So, I mean, that's kind of was the rule. You know, it's like, wasn't they were going to chastise you and make, hey, what are you doing? No, they just wouldn't. It was all about work.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Good real life education, right? Like that's exactly the way it works. You know?
I got kind of the tail end of that, you know, with very seasoned players, and that was probably done to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, and
it's cool to hear about. You know, there's so many. Certainly today too, but there's great players in every city, you know, and it's
really true.
You don't necessarily hear about them, but there's like such a wealth of great talent out there.
I've gone to so many different cities, and I've heard so many incredible players that just decided that they felt that their art was better suited and better for them at that particular environment. And man, I was like all for that. I was so, you know, it's amazing. It's incredible players everywhere. It's not just the cities. It's not just New York or LA or, you know, Chicago or.
Right.
It's everywhere.
Yeah,
you know?
No question. Well, speaking of New York, in 1977, you made the all-important move to New York City, and maybe you could take us through that time in your career. And also, I know the association with Thad Jones and Mel Lewis, that's such an important, pivotal part of your career. But I know that started very early on for you, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or that helped you make the move.
Well, I'd been playing Thad's music since the late '60s, early '70s, but it was always one of these. Wow, did he really mean that? You know, my ears were just like so square. And I was just like harmonically, I needed to really grow. And I thought, I was out on the road with this band, Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders, for about a year. And my brother got me on the band. My brother was with Bill Chase's band in
oh, wow.
early '70s. And he was hanging out with Wayne Cochran's band. And their alto player just had left, and they said, wow, we're looking for an alto player. So, well, my brother can do it. So going on the road for that year, kind of after about 11 months, I said, I really want to move to New York. I really want to experience what it's like in a big environment. Mm-hmm. And I needed to learn so much more. You know, I didn't want to stop here. I didn't want to stop where I was at. I wanted to keep growing. I wanted to keep going to school. And Minnesota was great, and so was the band I was with. But I wanted to push myself a little harder to see if I could, you know, catch some of those dreams you have as a kid when you're hearing Johnny Hodges or, you know, Basie's band, or you're hearing these great bands. And I said, wow, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I want to get on and breathe all that diesel fumes on those big buses, and, you know. But those early inspirations, you know, that I had, I really wanted to pursue it more and take jazz a little bit more seriously. I played a lot of different styles of music, and it was great, and I learned a lot, but now I wanted to challenge myself on another level. So I had to make some money, so I had to go back after that year. I went back to Minnesota for 2 years, 1975, 76, and half of '77, to save up about $5,000 because I figured, well, at least that'll give me 6 months in New York. And so after I made the $5,000 at Valley Fair, it was called. It was a new amusement park. I was playing there with Bob Correa. I don't know. And we had just talked about Bob. And
Yeah, tenor player from Buddy's band.
from
right?
Buddy's band.
Yeah.
And Bob, it was great. It was a great hang. And I got, to play with guys like him and Brian Gribna and the Petersons. And it was such an amazing pockets of incredible players. And so I saved up all this money. And by the time I saved it up, I developed an ulcer because the music was so lame. And I was so dedicated to make all that money and do as many shows as I could to get out of there. So I had to postpone my thing from late 76 to maybe the spring of 77. So what happened was my roommate at the time was a very good young saxophone player by the name of Randy Pink, and he was playing lead alto in the University of Minnesota jazz band. And they had Thad Jones come out as a guest artist that year. And so Randy came on and said, oh, Thad Jones is so happy. He's so amazing. Everything he says is so poignant and so instructional, and his music is just so difficult, but so challenging, so great. And he asked me if I'd like to go out and play with his band in New York. I said, great, are you going to do it? He said, no. I told him I wasn't good enough, but my roommate, which is you, is good enough. And since you had the money and you haven't gone out there yet, and you're just spinning your wheels here, I told him about you. I said, Randy, come on. He's probably just telling you, he's just trying to give you some bull. He's probably not. He says, well, I got his number. He says, that's probably not even his number. And so anyway, in Minnesota, they always made fun of people from Iowa. And they definitely did that. They could pull my leg. I'd fall hook, line, and sinker into everything that they said, So I figured, well, this is another joke. So he says, here's the number, Oats, call. So I said, I was getting ready for all this laughter. So I called up and I called the number. And it was a 201. And I said, hello. And he goes, yes, a very low voice. I said, I'm supposed to ask, is this Thad Jones? He goes, well, yes, it is. Who is this? I said, really? He says, who are you? I says, oh, my name is Dick Oatts. He says, Randy told me all about you. When can you come out? And I went, 2 weeks. And so I packed everything, sent it back to Iowa. I flew out. He said, call me when you get to the airport. So I got to LaGuardia and I called him, and it was a Monday. He says, you're playing tonight. You have your saxophone, your tenor, and your flute and your clarinet. And so I said, yes. He says, well, just take the taxi to the Vanguard. Here's the address. So I got there. I got there early, and I knocked on the door, and this bartender, Mike, pretty salty guy at the time, lets me in and says, look, put that ugly suitcase in the liquor cabinet and just go in the kitchen and just stay out of my way. So I was in there, and I'm just kind of like standing there like an Iowa hayseed. And there was this guy that I was sitting in there, and he was just jeans and a, kind of a tie-dyed shirt, and he was just kind of like, and he started looking at me, and I'm kind of getting nervous because I don't know who he is, and I just kind of assumed that he might be the janitor or something like that. He says, who are you? I says, oh, my name is Dick Oatts. I went to shake his hand. He wouldn't shake my hand. He says, what do you think you're doing here? He says, oh, I want to play with Thad Jones and Mel Lewis tonight. He goes, who says? I said, well, Thad Jones said. He says, what's your name again? I told him Dick Oatts, and he says, never heard of you. Who have you played with? Well, I just came from Minnesota. He says, I don't know anybody from Minnesota. He says, you look pretty young, Have you ever read music before? He says, yeah, I've done a little. He says, what do you mean a little? You've either done, you can read or you can't. And he just started grilling me. And I'm going, wow, these New Yorkers are so intense. He says, can you play solos? Can you double? Can you blend? You know, I don't even know you. I've never heard of you. You're going to come into this band, and this is the #1 band in New York, and you think you're going to come in here and just play this music? And then I was looking at him, and right before I was about ready to say, well, just who in the hell are you? Dad comes in and says, are you Dick Oatts? I said, yeah. Well, this is Mel Lewis. And I went, oh, man, it's so good. I was so glad I didn't. So my first night in New York, I got to play with Jerry Dodgen and Pepper Adams, and Earl Gardner was playing lead. John Mosca was playing trombone. Harold Danko, Rufus Reed, Ed Hickus, Rich Perry.
What a story.
Billy Campbell. I mean, it was just I was like, wow.
What an experience. That's incredible.
And so I played the night, and I finally got a solo. And, you know, it was funny because Mel didn't really say much, but as soon as I got done playing, it's just that Mel was a very protective musician.
Yeah.
And he didn't like guys that bullshitted and
Yeah.
would say something they couldn't back it up.
Yeah.
He'd heard a lot of that in his career, and he just was very, not in this band, you got to respect the music and stuff like that. And so I could see it. And that night, Dad said, you want to come back next week? I said, yeah. I says, well, don't bring your horn because I'm hearing other people, but come around and hang out. So I came back the following week. I heard the whole night. And I was hanging in the back with Earl Gardner at the time, having a beer. And he comes up to Earl Gardner, and Earl at that time was like over 400 pounds. He was a big guy,
right.
And he says, Big Bird, because that's what we all nicknamed him. He says, do you think I should give this guy a job? He says, no, Thad, he's too skinny. He'll die on the road. He'll starve to death. And so then Thad said, well, you got a passport? Do you want to go on the road? You want to go to Europe? And I didn't even know what a passport was. So that's kind of started my New York introduction.
Wow, that is awesome. So you obviously started on the tenor chair, and then
The tenor chair, yeah. It was like this, Mike. I didn't care what horn I played. I just needed to get good on everything I did. So if I could play tenor and play more solos and learn, I didn't care. I could be anything. I needed to learn how to play. So it could be on tenor, alto, soprano. I drew the line to baritone. It was a little bit too big. But I just wanted to learn how to blow. And so everybody seemed to hire more tenor players at that time to get that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that's certainly that versatility has paid tremendous dividends throughout your career, obviously on that Mills band, but in many other
Well,
situations.
Sonny Stitt was my hero,
Mm.
and he could play great alto and great tenor. And my father always said, look, you got to be able to play in both if you want to make a living.
Mm-hmm. So
I learned how to play in the section. I could learn how to play lead, different styles, and it was due to those two instruments, and I was happy I did it.
Yeah, awesome. So how did the transition over to the lead alto chair take place?
Well, a year later, later that summer, Pepper Adams went up to Thad Mills and says, look, I'm leaving after this tour. And so Ed Hickus said, well, I would love to move to the baritone. There's more solos to play, and I like the baritone.
Mm-hmm.
So Mel came up to me and said, look, Oats, Larry Schneider, I was subbing for Larry Schneider, who was with Horace Silver. And he said, Oats, Larry's coming back, and so you can always come back and sub. It's just too bad you don't play alto. And I said, what? He says, too bad you don't play alto because we're looking, because Ed Hickus is moving to baritone, Pepper's leaving, and we need a second alto player. So I said, well, Mel, I'm really an alto player. He goes, really? Well, I'll tell that. And 2 hours later, I had the second alto. Of course, I would have told him a complete lie just to keep the gig. But then a year later, Jerry was leaving, and Thad came up to me. He says, Oats, you're going to play lead. And I said, I don't know. Thad, is it okay if I just stay on second alto because I'm learning so much, And he says, no, you have no choice. It's lead or nothing. So I didn't want the responsibility
Hmm.
because I knew how much consistency you needed. I knew the intonation had to be more on check, and I just didn't want to play that strong. I was getting used to, playing under Jerry, and it felt so great because he was such an amazing player, lead alto player, and just a hero of mine.
Sure.
So I didn't want
Wow.
to follow those shoes.
Well, you certainly did, and but obviously Thad and Mel both heard the greatness in your playing and realized that you were going to be able to rise to the occasion, and you clearly have done that for many, many decades now.
I think they lit a fire in me and inspired me, and always very encouraging.
Mm.
Those two guys really, were totally wonderful at giving us all an opportunity,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't, my money would have ran out a long time ago had it not been for Thad Jones. To this day, I don't know why that guy ever took a chance. He didn't know me from Adam.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of guy he was. He took chances when he wrote music. He took chances hiring the band. He took chances all the time when he soloed. And that, to me, was as much a part of the band and its history, was that just risk-taking all the time. And it was just, and I figured that if they could take a risk in me, I could certainly start taking risks, being a better soloist and learning more of the essence of what I should be working on. And I thought I had something together out in Minnesota, but I was totally clueless.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't totally clueless because
Well,
you were in the ballpark. That's for
making
sure.
the band was easy. It was keeping the gig that got to be like, oh, now that I've bullshitted my way into this, now how can I, keep this gig in an earnest fashion? So.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly done that. That's for sure. I was wondering if, it's probably a bit of a sensitive topic, but, Thad leaving the band and I know that was done in somewhat of a dramatic fashion, but maybe you could talk about, what the mood was like for the band and for you guys. And I mean, it had to have been a tremendous blow for everybody. And I was curious as to your memories of that time.
Well, Thad had been going a lot over there to work with some of the radio bands and, getting paid as a writer and having a potpourri and a lot of instruments to work with. It was always a dream of every writer. And they were very supportive of him. And we had heard rumors, but Mel dismissed him. Oh, no, he just goes over there and does this, but he'll always come back. And, So, but we had started to hear stronger rumors. And we were doing a 3.5-month tour at that point in Europe. And, we were in Copenhagen. We're all over Europe. And it was kind of a young band. It was a new band at that last point in 78. It was the fall of 78. And Dad didn't say anything to Mel, and I just assumed that, well, they have something worked out, whatever, and maybe just going to spend more time over there. But nobody really knew. And I even wonder if Thad really knew until he made the decision. And he was involved with a person that he loved over there, and he loved the area. There was huge amounts of respect for Thad everywhere, but especially there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an opportunity. And when it kind of came down, it was like, sad to say the least, because that was one of Thad Mills' best financial years.
Oh, well.
Working, the Basie band and the Ellington band were all minimizing a little bit as far as the work, and that was the band,
Yeah.
the legacy, that was to take, us into the next future to me of that. And we got to a place in Stuttgart, and there was some kind of an argument, and Thad decided not to sit out a couple sets. And at the end of the the night, you know, I mean, it was a young band, and we'd all tried very hard to play his music, and it was difficult. And some of the guys worked harder than others, and I think Dad was a little upset that night. And I went up to talk to him, and I asked him. I said, "Was it, you know, anything I could?" He said, "Did I say it was about you?" I said, I didn't know how to answer that question, so I went and got a couple of vodkas and a beer and went back to him and said, "Dad, I've heard rumors, and whatever you do, I want to wish you the best life possible over here, you know." And then he opened up. He started telling me, "Oh man, I can write for French horns. I can write for strings. They're giving me all this opportunity for bigger percussion groups," and he just wanted to expand. I think he just, you know, he's a risk taker.
Yeah.
You know, and he wanted to try something new. He was a real pioneer and adventurist, and that was always the spirit. And that every time he led the band, you never know what was going to transpire. You know, and he still wanted to keep that spirit, and I think that it was the right move that he felt it was necessary for him. And it was hard for Mel, because Mel felt a little blindsided. But after that, you know, Mel was, luckily we had the gig at the Vanguard to keep us. Everybody thought the band split up, but you know, Mel. Our first tour after that was with Buddy DeFranco, and then Mel says, "Oh, wow, what are we getting?" I said, "Well, let's listen to some of your records that you've been on." Because every time I went over to Mel's, we'd listen to hundreds of recordings, you know. And Mel loved to talk. talk. I mean, the only way you could get Mel to stop talking is to tell him that you had to go to the bathroom. That's the only thing he respected. So, and so we talked, and I said, "Mel, listen to all these great writers that you've worked with. From Terry Gibbs to Kenton's band to Brookmeyer and Holman and all these great writers. Let's call up Brookmeyer or Holman or one of these guys." And we started talking to them. We got to start bringing in new music. And we talked for hours about that. And then when I was leaving, Mel says, "You know, Oats, I got a great idea. I want to call up Brookmeyer. I'm going to call up." I said, "Great, let's go, Mel. Let's go." So we were getting writers like Mincer, and Maria Schneider was bringing stuff in, and Pedshock, and just Bill Finnegan, and of course Brookmeyer bringing in such amazing stuff, and Holman. So we were like kids in a candy store playing that music. I was just like, wow. You know, it was just like playing Thad Jones's music when Thad was there. It's like, wow, they're literally a foot in front of me, and they're telling me, "Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that?" I felt like, man, this is it. This is what I moved to New York for.
I remember you guys had and that's so cool to hear the lineage of how that actually took place. That the influence that you had on the situation is fantastic. I remember being in college and getting I think it was called Bob Brookmeyer Composer Arranger, featuring that Mel Lewis Orchestra.
Yeah, that was a great book.
And you played the most unbelievable solo on Skylark that it still kills me whenever it's just absolutely spectacular. But I remember hearing that record, and it really felt like the band had shifted and come into its own identity post Thad.
I think so. I think that's very astute. I think that was the thing that really bridged, gave Mel a bridge to say, this is the Mel Lewis Orchestra now. And Brookmeyer was so patient, so amazing, and coming back from L.A., and leaving some of his demons behind, and just was writing prolifically, just kept coming out with stuff that we were going like, what? And when he brought in Skylark for the first time, I was just like, what is this, major thirds going in half steps? What am I going to do with this? I go like, I'm just still trying to get the blues together. And so I said, Bob, what do you think? He says, Oats, just give us some time. Take some chances. Here's some different people. He says, I know you can do it. And so when we recorded it, I was like, I was probably the most nervous I'd ever been.
Really? Wow.
Lee Konus was there, Clark Terry was there, all these amazing people. It was live to 2-track at the Vanguard, and what I envisioned was the alto was this small, and I was 10 feet tall, so my sound wouldn't get too, small or tense or something like that. So, but anyway, that was like, to me, an arrangement that I knew then that it was composers and arrangers like that that truly defined great music and great bands and the solos that came from those bands.
Mm-hmm.
From Duke's band, to Woody's band. There were so many great solos that came out from some of those charts, that arrangements or compositions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that being said, I was so humbled by Brookmeyer writing me that. I just said, I really got to go to school and try to figure out, what am I going to go do on Ding Dong Ding? It's one chord. It's one sound.
Right.
So I had to grow. I had to keep, and they kept me growing. And then, the other cats that he would write for, I just like, wow. That's what kept inspiring me to, and it's the same way with everybody in the band.
Yeah.
Playing better, blending better, listening harder. Stuff that, as young people we go to a certain extent, but hey, the level keeps going up and up and up. And you're going to just sit back and play the same way you did when you're 25, 30? No, it's going to the bar is going to keep raising. And that's why I love that band, because every time I think, well, maybe I played long enough. No, I keep getting my ass kicked. Either from the music or from guys like, Dodgen or Lovano or Pepper Adams or Rich Perry or Steve Coleman or Kenny Garrett or, Billy Drews.
Yeah.
Ralph Lalama. I mean, just like, it's an embarrassment of riches for me. I mean, I never had the college, but that was like, every Monday was like going to church and getting my ass kicked at the same time.
That's awesome. Well, in addition to that solo, I know for me, when I heard you playing lead alto on that particular recording, I was blown away. I thought, this is the greatest lead alto playing I've ever heard. As a young person, I still think that now, many, many decades later. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned the influence maybe that Jerry had on your lead playing, listening to him, but how do you approach, even whether it's then or now, your approach to lead alto playing? And I'm curious, from a brass perspective, what is it that you key off of in terms of lead trombone or lead trumpet, and maybe what you look for in the qualities that you look for in good lead trumpet playing, good lead trombone playing? And also, if not to get too wide with the question, but how you approach your own section in terms of what you look for, and having because that's the other thing about your lead playing. It seems to galvanize the whole section. It just feels like the section is.
Well, I like to have a section that hears the same kind of time, on different types of arrangements, versatile with their time, that can be versatile with their articulation, and give me a chance to not work as hard trying to put it forth. I'd rather have me as kind of just like a little the icing on the cake, but the meat and potatoes are really coming from the section itself.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that if I can have that, then I can float more. I can make adjustments towards putting different phrasing things on top, and I don't have to work so hard. Also, I like to dig in, and I like to have a baritone player that anchors that. I like to have a second alto player that has a darker sound than mine. So I don't have to feel it's the same sound. I need that depth. And the second alto player is the hardest section of the book, and that's the one to me that transcends the communication throughout. I like to have one light tenor sound and one dark tenor sound. I like different improvisers. I don't like to have the same kind of improvisers, because then you'll get the same kind of solos over and over. So I like to pick people with different voices and people that have a lot of reference towards a section. You can be the greatest soloist in the world, but unless you're listening, not just to me, but to the lead trumpet and to the ride cymbal and the drums, then that's a pretty big hole. And if you don't get that, then it's hard for me to give them that. They have to be wanting that. I've had players that say, well, I had one guy come in with, remember those shields that came in the bell of the, well, I can't hear myself. I said, wait. I said, but now all I can hear is you. I said, if you can't hear yourself, play softer and try to blend with the lead trumpet player. You don't need to hear yourself all the time. You have to fit in. And there's so many, that's the thing about great music, is it really makes your ears, as you know, it makes your ears have to be versatile. One minute you're playing soprano with trumpets in mutes, and that's dangerous. Next minute you pick up a flute and it's a low D or something, and you have to play that with Harmon mutes or with flugelhorns or something like that. And the next minute you're playing a sax solo that, and so I always, from all the gigs that I did, it's not just jazz gigs, from all the gigs that we've done, playing a variety of different work, from cabaret shows and from sports shows and big bands that aren't necessarily jazz band, but ones that I learned a lot of what to do, what not to do. And if I was doing this, I wouldn't want to play like that. And so I want, so all that kind of transcended. And for me, what's probably defined my lead alto as much as anything was Earl Gardner. His time, his sound, he just had huge arms, And now Nick Marchione is the same way. I learned so much from the lead trumpet player. And, when Thad left, kind of the core with me and Mosca and Earl Gardner and Mel and McNeely, we were there. And so it was easier for Mel to transcend into his band, because we'd all played together. We all had a sound together, our rhythmic glue and concept together. So when new guys would come in, they could fit right into that big picture. And so that's kind of what helped us go into the next generation of Mel, and then it transcended into the Vanguard after that. But really, to me, not just because this is mainly a brass oriented program, but for me, if I can fit into the brass trombones specifically, that rich sound, and the tenor players and can fit into that rich sound, that's what I want. I don't need reed players sticking out. I want them to blend first and foremost with the brass section. I don't want an accordion sound. I don't need an imbalance. I need a core. And so it's funny, when Mel first told me that we were recording one of the first digital CDs with a lot of Thad's music back in 1979 after Thad had split, and I said, Mel, we can't hear the reeds, all these great doubles and solos. He says, Oats, that's the way it is in a live performance. I'm going, But I learned a lot. He says, a lot of it is about how you blend. A lot of it's not hearing your part. A lot of it's not about that digital recording. A lot of it's about the wholesome blend, the impact that the whole band gets. And I got that from playing with, specifically with Mosca and Earl Gardner. You know.
Wow. Well, hope everybody I got a ton out of what you just said. It's really insightful, and talk about going to school. There it is.
Well, it made every
an
band
approach.
that I went to afterwards a lot more easier to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was playing with Faddis's band, I said, wow. When I played with Brookmeyer's band over in Europe, or a lot of the radio bands over there, she said, wow, it makes it so much more entertaining to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for all that, Dick. That's really insightful stuff. I want to just shift gears into, many of you probably remember the band Flim the BBs. I was a massive fan. I got all the DMP records, and then the stuff you did with George Massenburg. Maybe you could talk about how that band came into existence, and I was curious as to how that worked out. You were, like I mentioned with Tom Jung, you were with DMP for several records. I still have them in my CD collection over there. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how Flim the BBs came into existence, and then I know you guys kind of started with DMP, and then it evolved into the work you did with George Massenburg, and I just really enjoyed the band on so many levels. Obviously, quite different music than you were playing with Ed and Mel, but maybe just talk about your time with that group.
Well, you know, when I was with Wayne Cock and the CC Writers, and I went back for the 2 years to make some money before I had, that's when I always knew Billy Barber and Bill Berg and Jimmy Johnson when I first moved up there. We were all close in age. Jimmy was the youngest, of course, but very versatile. These guys, Jimmy played great clarinet, and Billy could write great and was just more in the moment kind of a piano player, and was just getting into the synthesizers of the day. And Bill Berg was playing with a great band with Bob Rockwell called, what was the name of that band? I can't remember. New Life, I think. Anyway, so they had a group, and Jimmy's nickname was always Flim. And they used Bill Barber and Bill Berg, and they just called him Flim and the BBs. And they'd go around and just do, they were in and out of the studios all day, and they just needed a break. So they'd come up with all these amazing music kind of on the spot. And they started to just get a few sessions together at these clubs, and would just be kind of a garage band and go in there and just work out their imagination and their fun. And so when I came back, they asked me if I'd like to come and sit in a few times, and I did. And we ended up recording the first record that we did was called Flim the BBs, and it was a LP. And we were recording direct to disc, so the story with that. And
sure.
So you have to go 20 minutes straight through, and if you make a mistake, you gotta do the damn thing over again. So we did that, and we went 20 minutes straight through, and we finally got through it. And I was in New York at the time, and I was coming back to do it. That gave me a chance to, okay, you can take 2 weeks before we go to go do that. So I came back, and then I got back, and somebody took the acetate, or whatever they call those, and they dropped it. So the thing broke and shattered. But at the same time, 3M had some experimental tape in the back, and they said, well, let's hear that, because that might work. And it was the first digital tape.
Oh, wow.
So they took that tape and put it on the LP. So that's why it's a collector's item. It's very rare. If you go into the high fidelity guys, you can't find that record, because it was one of the first digital albums ever made. But then after that, Jung, about a year or two later, Tom Jung wanted to expand, so he moved to Stanford in Connecticut, and opened up his new corporation, DMP, Digital Music Products.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
And so one of the first bands he asked was Flim the BBs to come and do a recording. And so I was in and out of town, and they asked me, they had asked me to come in and sit in with them on a couple. It was at the old A&R where the Union used to be on. I think the Union is still there, but there used to be A&R.
A&R used to be in the building.
And that's where we recorded the first ones, right there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we went and recorded thing, and I was on about maybe 5 of the takes or something. And it was just one day. We just all did it in one day. And I was amazed. These guys sounded tremendous. And it was so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was always fun to play with them. And we always took time around Thanksgiving to do it because that was the time that they had off. And I unfortunately didn't. I was working Radio City, but I had the time to take off there to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
we ended up doing our first one and called Tricycle for DMP. And it was amazing. It started to sell like incredible because there wasn't any music like that. No Spyro Gyra or Yellow Jackets at that time. It was just one of the first digital, and it was like all the sound guys, the buffs that really loved great sound, loved the dynamic levels of that,
Mm-hmm.
of what Jung would do. So it was as much of a feat of what Tom Jung did in engineering as the band's dynamics, natural dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
So we did Tricycle, and that eventually became a gold
Wow.
seller. And then we did Tunnel, and Big Notes, and a couple more after that. And then they started amazing. I started getting amazing residuals for a minute.
Mm.
You know how short-lived that stuff always is. So it was great. I was just like, wow, I couldn't believe it. But it was so funny to have, like I had a dual life with that band because nobody knew that Oats, you know, like Lavana would call me from driving back from Cleveland. He says, Oats, I heard this thing. I know that's your sound. But the name of the band, what was it, Flim and the BBs? What the hell? And he says, what is that? He says, I didn't say much because I kind of kept that identity hidden because I didn't want them to know, like, well, Oats is he playing jazz or what's he playing there? You know, like, so I love that style and I love playing that adventurous approach to it. I was lucky enough to expand a little bit on that. I could have taken it more seriously, I guess, but I really loved playing in that style with that band specifically because I felt it was so unique and adventurous, and it was just fun.
Yeah.
You didn't know. We'd go into it with nothing as far as music, and we just compose it on the spot.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
we'd
wow.
have some ideas, but every record was like that.
Oh, is that
Well,
right?
we'd all pool in the middle. What are we going to do now? What started to be took one day, the next one took 2 days, and the next CD took 3 days. The next one took 4, and then it kept, because we had, and then a lot of people, why aren't you traveling with this as well? Because Bill Berg was working with Walt Disney as a head animator. Jimmy was then working with James Taylor and doing so much studio work in the West Coast. And Bill Barber was doing a lot of studio work in Manhattan and writing a lot of stuff for soap operas and all kinds of music. And I was going out with Mel and Red Rodney and Eddie Gomez, and I didn't want to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Flim the BBs was great, but I kind of got myself to playing. I was playing like more than 8-bar, 16, 2 choruses. I was starting to play mini choruses in it, and I didn't know how that would fit in if I was on
Right.
the road playing that.
Right.
So
You know, it's interesting because your sound to me is such an integral part of that. I mean, I can't imagine the group without your sound. I mean, it's such an important.
well, you know, they made me a member, bona fide member, after the first recording, Tricycle, because Billy was really for it, and I was going like, well, man, they sound so unique as a trio, but I think they wanted something more voice-like
Mm-hmm.
and not just the synths and an amazing rhythms section
Yeah.
sound. And I think that it was a treat because I love those guys. I still do this day. They taught me so much, and they were so giving and so much a part of my development. from my Minnesota days.
Yeah.
So I'll never
Speaks-
forget that. It changed a lot of the directions away. I even play now in intervallically and leaving certain spaces. And
It really speaks to how your versatility to me, like the fact that you can fit so seamlessly in that context, but then of course, you know, whatever you want to do jazz-wise, you can easily
well, it was
fit
funny
into that.
because I had a just recently, about a year ago, a friend of mine called me. He said, "Look, I'm doing the View with this singer that's doing a jazz artist, you know."
Mm.
And she's, kind of been a pop, more of a Latino singer. She's from Florida, very well known. And she had Dave Koz on her record.
Mm.
And I'm just playing in the backup band with our friends.
Mhm.
And so I said, well, I don't really want to do it because I know those shows, they don't pay that much. And there's a lot of sitting around and waiting.
Yeah, sure is. Right?
But I forgot to tell him no, and he says, "Well, it's tomorrow." And I said, "Oh God, okay." So I went and did it, and there was Dave. Dave Koz was doing his thing, and then they said, "Well, Dave Koz can't make the next one, so can you play in that style?" I said, "Well, I've done a little bit of it, in my past," and so it was kind of fun to, show younger people that
Yeah,
there's a lot of versatility in us all.
Yeah, well, certainly.
You have the
that's where
grayest
you-
hair. I've heard so much versatility from so many people that I emulate for years and years. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I just want to shift and we got to get you to the Vanguard tonight, so I want to cover just a few more important things. But, I mentioned at the beginning how prolific you are as a solo artist, in addition to everything else you're doing, which is phenomenal. I was wondering if you could just maybe pick out a couple of your favorite solo projects. I think are you still with Steeplechase these days?
Yeah, I'm still with Steeplechase. I haven't done anything the last couple of years, but I've been. The record industry CD has changed so drastically, as you know. It's hard to justify it sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
But probably I did one of my records with Dave Santoro called Meru. It was all on tenor, and I did it for Red Records, which is a guy, Sergio Vesci in Italy. It's called Red Records because it was a communist label, and he's a staunch communist. And so he goes, "Dick Oatts, no alto, only tenor." So I said, what the hell? So I was in the mid-90s. I said, I'll break it out again. So that was one of my first breakthrough, playing most of my music. I also did some co-leader stuff with Gary Dial in the late 80s.
Yeah.
With a chamber group of strings, and Jay Anderson and Joey Barron played great on it.
I have those.
So we did that with
records. Yeah.
called Dial and Oats, and the second was called Brassworks, which we used a 12-piece chamber brass section, which is great. Rich DeRosa did the music there, and then Dial and I. This was all on DMP because when the BBs left, Dial and I took up the DMP, and so then we did a Cole Porter salute to the verses that Cole Porter wrote, and so then after that, a couple of years went by, and I started to go more to Europe, tour a lot more over there, and so just started to meet people and I've known Nils Winter since I recorded with Red Rodney on that label in the mid '80s, and I asked Nils if he would do something. He said yes, and he's a great guy to work for and would let me do anything that came to my mind. So he would take any of my lousy charts or anything, and he would record it. So the first thing I gave him was actually a recording of some standards called Standard Issue Volume 1 and Volume 2. We just did live with our DAT player and went around all these clubs in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and just recorded everything for 2 years, and they just took the best stuff and put it there.
Oh wow, that's great.
And then, I started writing a lot more music for that. And probably one of my most favorites still to this day is a thing called All of Three. It was just trio, just bass, drums, and alto. And a lot of the way I like the solo now is having duets within the band. So sometimes, like in all of 3, I just like the duets that I had with the drummer, James Oblon. And Dave Santoro would be the straight guy, and we kind of dance around his, you know, his time, and it just gave me a lot more stuff to work with. And I started to free up a little bit of, you know, in a big band, you're so used to condensing everything, and this was such an open palette, and I needed to do a lot more of that, and I started to take that a lot more seriously. And then started recording more with that, and I've had so many amazing players on my CDs. I'm just blessed to have done some writing and having them play it. That was the biggest thrill, and you know how that is, right?
Absolutely.
When you can hear great players playing
Realizing
your
music.
charts that are challenging, and they're doing it and they're working on it, and like Terrell Stafford and Joe Magnarelli, and you know, that Scott Winnold playing my music, and recorded with John Mosca, and just that has really made me think more out of the box and keep growing as a leader now, and as a composer.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
I just did
inspiration for all of us.
One last CD I did with Gary Dial. It was called, it was a Walt Whitman. We dedicated the music to Walt Whitman. So it was all Walt Whitman's poetry that we put music to, entitled That Music Always Around Me. And that was a real challenge. I never write melodies for poetry like that. I was like so intimidated, but I would like to do maybe a few more things like that in the future, but mainly I want to concentrate on expanding the freedom of expression, blowing in smaller confines.
Well, we look forward to hearing whatever you decide you're going to whatever direction.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your teaching, because you're a world-renowned saxophone teacher and jazz teacher. You've been on the faculty at Temple now for almost a decade, and maybe talk about, I know with Terrell Stafford, one of the most amazing musicians ever, and an incredible educator, and what you guys have built there. It's really quite the program.
Well, it's really Terrell's vision, and I'm just so fortunate that he included me in his path. It's been an amazing education as well as inspiration to see how well he is versed in so many directions of educating young people interested in this pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was at Manhattan School of Music for years, and I loved it there. And it was a great program. I was able to experience some great students there.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot from that level. I learned a lot teaching at NYU. I learned a lot going around doing all the college clinics that we do, and that over the past, 35 years. But it's very rare that I get to teach with somebody like Terrell Stafford. He's he has so many elements that he could move into and flow in and out of, depending on the situation that needs. He's so versatile, and everything is so geared to encourage and make the student want to follow their dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so amazed at what he's built at Temple, and the faculty that he's surrounded himself with is so top-notch. And just being there for my 10 years, it's went from one jazz band to now 3, and the amount of small groups is way doubled, and the money that we have to work with has grown. We have a dean that's sensational, and the whole thing is built really on Terrell's shoulders. And when he invited me to come down and leave Temple, there was no hesitation.
Mm.
We had did one thing at the University of North Carolina with Jim Ketch. And that's where I had first heard him with Bobby Watson's band. But when I saw him teach, I said, wow, that was the full thing. And the thing that I love about Terrell is that he covers so many angles. He's a great composer to me. He's a great trumpet player. He's a great educator.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, he can build a program. He can build from a great program. He can build with nothing. And there's very few people like him. And everywhere I go, I've seen where he's been, and I've seen the aftermath and the spirit behind it. So as well as being a Pied Piper, he's a remarkable musician that I'm lucky in this lifetime to have an opportunity to be friends with and colleagues, and work with the Vanguard, in the Vanguard band.
Yeah,
with
of course.
So many of those players I love. Everybody that I've worked with in that band has taught me about education, has taught me about all that.
Yeah.
You know? But to have a guy, that Terrell has a way of piecing it all together. So.
Yeah, that's. I had the good fortune of, and I saw you down there a couple of weeks ago. My son and I went down, and he was so gracious to give Zach a lesson. And I remember seeing Zach's eyes as he walked out of the lesson, just like, that was so inspiring and humbling. And he was, so into it. And it was great. And he got to see you, and then Steve Wilson was giving a master class. So
that was a great week. I remember Steve's master class too. It was fantastic.
So it's quite a program you guys have built, and I can
definitely
endorse what you guys are doing there. So everybody should consider that as a if you're at that level that you can think about going to a place like that. It's quite
commuting
the school.
down there's been nothing, because it's such an inspiration when I'm there. I'm just going, wow, the commute is really short when you consider the inspiration I get from all the students and faculty down there. And my kids are going to go to school there.
Yeah.
I already have one there, so
yeah,
that's how much I love it.
Yeah,
believe in it. So.
It's a great school to go to. Well, Dick, I just, as we wrap up tonight, thank you so much for coming. I know you were in Manhattan rehearsing. You were gracious enough to drive all the way up here. Now you're going back in to do the Vanguard. We really appreciate it. And I figured we'd just close out, if you don't mind. I'm just going to throw some Vanguard names at you and just give me like a one-sentence response to what these...
that might be hard.
Or as best you can to
Okay.
that. Let's start with these are all people that you've had, intimate and long associations with. Let's start with the great Joe Lovano.
Well, Joe is like, every time he plays, it's always in the moment and always inspirational to me. I've learned so much from the way Joe is just enveloping everybody in the club, in the band, as he plays.
Mm-hmm.
He is, to me, an amazing improviser.
How about Gary Smolyan?
Gary can play anything he remembers, hears for a moment. I've never heard anybody that can play as much stuff as this guy can play. I'm just like so intimidated, but so like pie-eyed every time I hear him play.
Jim McNeely.
Wow. He's such a compositional improviser, an amazing, he brought our band back from Mel. And he also, I'd known Jim since the National Stage Band Camps in 1966, when we were just kids. And so when he joined the band, it was like, wow, we got a great writer and a great pianist and somebody that is incredible at comping.
Yeah.
It's the best of all worlds.
The great Scott Winholt.
Wow. Scott always turns my head. He is such an improviser, and always, when I feel like my solos was the same one I played, 2 months ago, he's always never like that. He is always challenging himself and always in the moment. He is one of the most special improvisers in New York, I feel.
couple of my trombone brothers, Douglas Provines.
Wow. Well, Doug was in the band with my brother in Stan Kenton's band.
Of course, right.
And that's where I first met Douglas there. And then when he joined Thad Mill, I was so happy that I could have my association with Doug as like my brother had. And I've loved Doug for years, and he has done so many amazing life transformations. And he, after Mel left, was a total gift. He came on and he led us through and gave us the band that we have now. I mean,
Another one of your co-leaders, John Mosca.
John Mosca, my brother.
One of your co-leaders with the band.
My brother, Doug, and John are my co-leaders, and they are, as well as, John is the uncle of all four of my children. He married my sister. I introduced him to my sister. I was patient when he was dating my sister. One of the greatest jazz trombonists to me, and such an unsung hero of this music. He plays stuff on the trombone that alto players wish they could play. He's an incredible trombonist, just like Doug is incredible in what he does. Those two have single-handedly kept the Vanguard band alive, thriving, and continuing. And we've had 50 years and 25 years of just us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was largely due to their selflessness and love for the music.
Mm-hmm. And along the lines of the future of the band, Nick Marchione, great lead player.
Wow, yeah. I'm glad you brought up Nick, because Nick is one of the most amazing lead trumpet players. As a young man, he already has such depth and such reverence for the music. He has it all memorized. And anytime anybody has a complaint in the band about that trumpet section, I go, they have it. Nick, the lead trumpet player, has it memorized, and he's constantly coming up to John or me or Douglas with new exciting approaches, or how about this, and can we try this, and that's what we need. And that, to me, Nick is the next beautiful future of this band.
That's awesome. And just to close it out, Mel Lewis.
Well, he was like my second father. He was probably, while he was here, was very an unsung hero. But over the years, everybody has gotten to know Mel. Young kids are asking me about him, and Chris Smith's book that just came out about him from the back of the band. I'm excited for Mel because he's finally getting people that really understand his depth, and he gave us all so much. He was tireless. I mean, he could have, when Thad left, he could have went out as a sideman and made it, and had an amazing career and life, and wouldn't have had to put up with all of us. But what Brookmeyer said was that when Thad left, Mel got the kids. And Mel was like a father to us all. And he was, I can't, everybody in that band that had played with Mel or experienced Mel at some point as a subs or whatever knows how heavy. I mean, I love John Riley. He's a great drummer. He's one of the most, and we're lucky to have John come in. But it's like Thad. That'll never be repeated.
Mm-hmm.
Mel won't either.
Yeah.
But we have amazing players. I'll never play like Jerome. But I love Jerome, and I will. And it's the same thing with We All Love Mel. That'll always be kept in the music and in our hearts, and especially for future young players to grow in a very mature way
Mm-hmm.
and see something other than, you know, slam bam and, you know, wow and zing and
Yeah.
something other than that.
Yeah. Greatest big
Yeah.
band drummer ever for my money.
That's probably one of the my biggest things that I've had happen to me in New York was that association, because playing with him not only in a big band but in a small group and recording some of the CDs that a lot of us did in the band with Mel in a small group. Wow, that was some when drummers like Alvin Jones and you know, Buddy Rich and all these guys would come down to Vanguard to check him out.
Says it all.
Says it all.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Dick, thank you so
Mike,
much. This has
thank
been
you
awesome,
so
man.
much.
You're the best in every way,
yeah.
and
I've
we
had a
appreciate
great time.
you.
Thank you for
taking
having
the
me
time
on
and-
this program and
It's
Bone2Pick.
yeah. It's such our pleasure, Dick. The great Dick Oatts. Keep an eye out for all the amazing work that he's doing in the future. Thanks for joining us, and we will see all of you next time on Bone2Pick.